Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. It's so great to have you back here again for a new episode. And if you are new here, welcome to my channel. Why don't you stick around to see what kind of shocking true crime story I have for you today. And please do subscribe to the channel for more true crime content. Before I start with the episode, I would just like to give out my disclaimer, and that is my channel is not meant to disrespect any of the victims or the families of the victims that I talk about in these videos, and the information that I share with my audience is simply just research taken from different sources of the internet and compiled into one video. And the main purpose of my channel is for educational and awareness purposes of the different types of crimes we face on a daily basis. And the content warning of this case is that in this case I will be talking about murder, so if you are sensitive to that kind of content, then viewer discretion is very much advised. Alright guys, remember I said that I've got a friend of mine who's now helping me research these cases. Well, recently she has been dealing with a lot of things on her side. She's been busy with a lot of things on her side. So I will be working on my own again until she gets back. So that means you will be getting one episode a week, like how it used to be before, instead of two, like how it's been now. So I do hope you guys can understand, because like I said before, covering these cases, researching these cases is a lot of work when you're doing it solo. So I hope you guys can understand on that part. But let me not waste any more time and get into this week's case. And it is another international case, the second international case to be covered here on my channel. So sit back, relax, and let me tell you all about the case of Mollie Tibbetts. Mollie Tibbetts was born on May 8th in 1998, and she was born in San Francisco, California, to her parents, Laura and Rob Tibbetts. Mollie had two siblings, an older brother by the name of Jake and her younger brother, Scott. So she was the middle child of the family. And she had a pretty good childhood with two loving parents, and she also had a great start in school, so she grew up quite well. But then in 2007, a little bit of a change had to happen in Mollie's life when her parents decided to get a divorce. And Mollie was still in the second grade at this time in 2007. So after the divorce, she and her siblings moved with their mother to Brooklyn, Iowa, where they would spend the next few years of their childhood in. Now at first, this move had quite a bit of an effect on the kids because they were still dealing with the separation of their parents. But even though their parents were now divorced, Rob still kept in contact with his kids. They were all still pretty close. And as a matter of fact, the last time Rob Tibbetts saw his daughter Mollie was at his own wedding in June of 2018. So they were still in touch with their dad, even though they were now living in Iowa and he was still in California. But as the years went by, Mollie and her brothers Scott and Jake ended up actually settling in quite nicely in Iowa, and they started to love it and they started to form their own lives. And then Mollie went on to attend the Brooklyn Gurney Malcolm Jr. Senior High School, but we can call it the BGM High School for short. And while she attended the BGM High School, it was said that Mollie actually became the social butterfly among her friends, and she was always the person who wanted to bring peace in any environment that she found herself in. And so with that being said, of course, she had a lot of friends, and she was also described as a very bright young person with a golden heart. Then in 2015, Mollie met a young man by the name of Dalton Jack. Dalton was actually a senior at BGM High School, and on one evening, Dalton and his friends were done playing football. And after a game of football, they were all just chilling in their pickup truck when they were approached by a group of juniors. And among those juniors was Mollie Tibbetts. Mollie and Dalton ended up connecting that night. They ended up hitting things off, and Dalton almost fell for Mollie instantly. He thought she was the cutest girl he had ever seen, and he loved the way she would always make him laugh. He loved her sense of humor. So after they exchanged numbers, they ended up getting pretty close. They would spend a lot of time watching movies together, and then as time went on, they became an official couple. Then 2 years later, Mollie had to move away to pursue her major in psychology at the University of Iowa in Iowa City. Now, even though things were about to be different from now on, she and Dalton still held on to each other despite the distance that was gonna be between them. Dalton, on the other hand, decided to stay in Brooklyn, and he pursued his own career in the construction industry. So he and Mollie made arrangements to see each other almost every weekend. And whenever Mollie would come back home for the holidays, she would keep herself busy by working at the Grinnell Regional Medical Daycare Center. And she also enjoyed jogging in the evening when the sun had gone down and the temperatures along with it. And again, whenever she was home, she would split her time between being at Dalton's place and also being with her mother, Laura, back at home. And since Dalton worked in construction, it meant that his work could take him anywhere. Sometimes he would work locally, and then sometimes he would have to move to wherever the project took him. Even if it took him to other parts of the state that were quite a distance away from Brooklyn. And back at his place, which is on the outskirts of Brooklyn, Dalton lived with his brother and his pets. So on July 18th in 2018, he had a work project that took him to a highway that is near Dubuque, which is about 130 miles away from Brooklyn. And also his brother was out of town as well, and so Mollie decided to go stay at Dalton's place so she could look after his dogs while he was away on work. And having the house to herself also gave Mollie the opportunity to focus on her studies as well without being interrupted at all. And then finally, when the sun set at around 7:30 p.m., Mollie decided to go out for her daily evening jog. But unfortunately, she would never come back from this jog. And when Dalton texted her that night, he never got a reply from her, but then he assumed that maybe she got tired from being busy all day and then she just decided to go to sleep. But then on the next day in the morning, when he still hadn't heard a single word from her, that's when Dalton started to get worried about Mollie. Dalton reached out to some friends to see if they heard anything from Mollie, and they hadn't. And also when Mollie's supervisor from the daycare center called to find out why she hadn't come into work that day, that's when it started becoming obvious that something was terribly wrong here. And since Mollie wasn't the kind of person to just disappear on her family, her friends, and her boyfriend, the people who knew and cared about her started to have some very serious concerns for her safety. So finally, after she was reported missing, the police and the community started an active search to try to find Mollie and bring her back home safe and sound.
You wouldn't ever think that you'd see your best friend on a missing poster.
Alexis Lind and Breck Goodman are Mollie Tibbetts' best friends, both left with a lot of questions.
Where is she? Like, she's just gone. How is this happening?
And as they await answers, they can't help but smile, chatting about one of their favorite people.
Her personality's just like, it just takes you, grabs you in, and you just feel like you just want to talk to Mollie.
They put out missing person posters all over town, hoping that someone could finally have some information about her, and they even went as far as going into other towns that were nearby, hoping that they could find something that could tell them what happened to Mollie or where she is. People on social media all over the US were also getting involved in the search for Mollie, and they were trying to help bring her home in any way they possibly could. They were raising awareness on social media, and they also donated as much as they can so that more efforts can be put into finding Mollie and bringing her back home. Over the next few weeks, police received a ton of leads from different states regarding Mollie's disappearance. And one of these leads included an unconfirmed sighting at a truck stop in Kearney, Missouri. But police later found out that that specific lead didn't pan out. She was not sighted at that truck stop. The police received over 2,300 tips and did over 500 interviews during this investigation. And they also discovered that Mollie was always known to wear her fitness tracker on her, and so they tried to track her down using it, but that also didn't work out. Then about 4 weeks after Mollie went missing, the police decided to focus their investigation in areas in and around Brooklyn. And these included a truck stop, her boyfriend's place, a car wash, and they also put out a reward of close to $400,000 on any information that would lead to finding Mollie. Mollie's father, Rob Tibbetts, also took a flight from California to Iowa to also help in trying to find his daughter. But the search for Mollie was not easy at all, because the area they were in, their town had a lot of cornfields, and they were huge. So they were a very huge area to cover. And also this was in July, and this meant the temperatures were very, very high at that point. But the people and the police of that community never gave up in trying to find Mollie and bringing her back home. Then in the middle of August, police got something that would finally help them solve this case. A neighbor was going through some surveillance footage when he saw something that he probably thought he should show to the police. And when the police saw this piece of footage, they knew that it would be a very important part in this investigation. The footage showed what is believed to be Mollie at around 7:45 p.m. as she was jogging on Boundary Street, when just a few seconds later a black Chevrolet Malibu was seen driving away from her direction. But of course, at first, this isn't that concerning. I mean, this person could just be driving coincidentally on the road that she was last seen on surveillance. But then just a few seconds later, the same car was seen on the very same street again. And then again at around 7:51 p.m. it was seen coming back from the same direction she jogged in once again. And then again at 8:07 p.m. it was seen headed back to that direction once again, but this time it was going a lot faster. So the car was going to and from the direction she was jogging in quite a few times. And then a woman by the name of Christina Stewart reported her sighting of Mollie as she was running east of Brooklyn on 305th Avenue. And this sighting matched with the time that was seen on the surveillance footage that I just talked about. So this now cemented the investigators' belief that the person seen on that footage was indeed Mollie Tibbetts. So now when they looked at all this information that they have, including the black Chevy Malibu that was seen driving up and down her jogging route, investigators were believing that the person who was driving this car could be of interest to the investigation. And it didn't really take long for them to find this car. As a matter of fact, a deputy was just driving around town one day when he saw this car and decided to follow it until the driver eventually stopped on his own. And the person who was driving this car was a man by the name of John Budd. John was questioned about the disappearance of Mollie, and he claimed he knew absolutely nothing about it. And since the police only wanted to question him, he was released after that. But then just 2 days later, investigators were still looking into this man, and then they decided to go to his place of work at the Yarraby Farms. And when they got there, they noticed that this time John wasn't driving his black Chevy Malibu. He was actually driving his girlfriend's car. So that seemed a little bit off. So they invited John over to the station to ask him a few more questions about Mollie's case. And after hours of being interrogated, John decided that he finally had something to say about the disappearance of Mollie Tibbetts. But before he went anywhere, it was also revealed that John Budd wasn't even his real identity. It turned out that John's real identity was actually Christian Bahina Rivera, and he was 24 years old at the time of this case, and he lived and worked in the Poweshiek County area where Mollie went missing. Christian is originally from Guerrero, Mexico, and he actually got into the United States illegally at the age of 17, and he ended up staying in the US over the next few years after that. And then in August of 2014, Christian worked at another farm before he moved to the Yarraby Farms in Brooklyn, Iowa. And since he was in the US illegally, that's when he decided to use the identity of John Budd whenever he received his paychecks. And when investigators interviewed Christian, aka John Budd, a little further about Mollie's whereabouts, this time he said he had seen Mollie on the evening of her disappearance. He said that he saw her jogging and he decided to approach her, and then he was starting to run up next to her. But when he tried to talk to her, it didn't work. And then when he kept on trying to pursue her, that's when Mollie told him where to get off, and then she said she would call the police if he didn't stop what he was doing. And then after that, Christian said he just blacked out.
He actually tells us that he ran alongside of her or behind her. And then at one point he tells us that Mollie grabbed a hold of her phone and said, "You need to leave me alone, I'm going to call the police."
And after 10 hours of interrogation, on the next day of August 21st in 2018, according to investigators, Christian Rivera confessed to kidnapping and killing Mollie Tibbetts before dumping her body. And then he decided to take investigators to a part of land just outside of Brooklyn. And when the police got there and kept on looking, they noticed an opening among the corn plantation. And when they looked a little bit closer, that's when they found the body of Mollie Tibbetts.
Tonight, we're learning more about the undocumented immigrant charged with killing college student Mollie Tibbetts in Iowa.
But a neighbor's camera recorded critical evidence police say led them to that undocumented immigrant, who then led investigators to her body in a cornfield this morning.
We first approached Mr. Rivera yesterday.
After a month of searching, an arrest in the disappearance of Mollie Tibbetts, 24-year-old Christian Rivera, undocumented, charged with first-degree murder. Authorities say he provided extensive details, leading them to her body about 12 miles outside of Brooklyn, Iowa this morning.
Mollie was found partially naked under some corn stalks, and by the state of her decomposition, it was obvious that she had been left there for quite some time. And according to Christian Rivera, he said that he panicked when Mollie said she would call the police if he didn't stop hitting on her, and so out of panic, he decided to kill her and then dump her body. He killed Mollie by stabbing her 7 to 12 times, on her neck, in the chest, on her ribs, and on her skull as well. So judging by those details, you could also tell that the chances of Mollie surviving that night were very slim. And of course, everyone who was invested in trying to find Mollie and bringing her back home safe and sound was just devastated when they heard the news of Mollie's murder, when they heard that her body had been discovered in that cornfield. It was just really devastating for them to learn that her life had been taken in that way. Then on August 22nd, in 2018, Christian Rivera was charged with the first-degree murder of Mollie Tibbetts. And when the prosecutor raised the possibility of him being a flight risk, his bail was raised from $1 million to $5 million. And then on September 19th, he pleaded not guilty to the charges laid against him. And while the case faced a lot of delays, forensic investigators were deeply analyzing Christian's car to see if they can find any more evidence that they could use against him. Because even though he had confessed to being the one who killed Mollie, and even though he had already taken the police to where her body was found, he retracted his words and also pleaded not guilty to the charges that were laid against him. So now it became a matter of stacking up evidence against him. There was blood found on the rim and in the trunk of his car, and the DNA profile in the trunk actually matched the known DNA profile of Mollie Tibbetts. The case got a lot of publicity, and the public was so angry, understandably so, that the safety concerns of the trial were put on the table, and the trial itself ended up being pushed back a few more months, and it was also even moved to a different county because of those safety concerns. And then in August of 2019, basically a year later, Christian's defense counsel filed a lengthy motion arguing that his interrogation should not be used as evidence in the trial because Christian was not read his Miranda rights during that interrogation. Then the trial got delayed once again after more time was granted by the judge. And once the trial got into 2020, the world faced the coronavirus pandemic, and that caused even more delays. And then finally, the trial began on May 17th in 2021. And when the trial started, the defense argued that Christian's rights were violated even before he was charged with the murder, and that illegal interrogation tactics were used to force him to finally confess to killing Mollie Tibbetts. At some point, they even tried to bring up the accusation that Mollie's boyfriend Dalton could have been the one who killed her because he had cheated on her 3 years prior. But of course, this didn't take the defense anywhere because Dalton had a solid alibi during the time of Mollie's murder. And it was also proven that he had no motive to support why he could have killed her in the first place. Christian Rivera then decided to take the stand and testify, but this didn't really work in his favor at all, because now he started changing his story dramatically. He claimed that 2 men broke into his house and they forced him to drive them around town, which eventually led to them finding Mollie Tibbetts, and then they decided to kill her, put her in his trunk, and then they also forced him to help them hide her body. And he said the only reason he decided to help them was because they were now threatening the life of his own daughter. But again, this new story of events didn't really take Christian's defense anywhere. And with all the evidence that was stacked up against him, it only took one day of deliberation to come back with a guilty verdict on May 28th in 2021. So Christian Rivera was found guilty of first-degree murder, and he was held without bond until August 30th in 2021, which is when he was given a mandatory sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole. And this man showed no emotions or reactions whatsoever when his sentence was being announced. Christian got incarcerated at the Iowa State Penitentiary at Fort Madison, and that is where he'll be spending the rest of his life. One more thing that I felt is very much worth mentioning is that since Christian was an illegal immigrant in the United States, this case got a lot of political publicity to it. And with that being said, two people who knew Christian but also had no part in Mollie's murder ended up being targeted and bullied to a point where they ended up leaving Brooklyn, Iowa, and they had to leave their son behind, 17-year-old Ulysses Felix. But then Mollie's mom knew that her daughter wouldn't want people who had nothing to do with this to suffer for the actions of Christian. So Laura decided to adopt Ulysses to give him a chance at a better life. So now with her dad, who actively took part in trying to find her and trying to bring her back home, and her mom, who took in an innocent teenager who got caught in the crossfire of an evil man's actions, we can definitely see that Mollie took after her parents when it came to the heart of gold that everyone who knew her said she had. But yeah guys, that was the story of Mollie Tibbetts. And you know, every time I cover these cases, I try to keep the families in my thoughts, and I try to keep thinking about what they had to lose when they lost their loved one. And that always keeps me focused on the fact that these are not just stories on a YouTube video. These are actually someone else's reality. They have to live with the loss of their loved ones every day. And that is just heartbreaking to think about. So I hope you also look at it the same way, and you also think about the victims and their families. So with that being said, I would just like to say I am terribly sorry to the family of Mollie Tibbetts for their loss, and I hope that Mollie is resting in peace and that she's in a better place. And that is all that I have for you guys on this episode. Please do let me know what you think about it in the comments. And if you enjoyed watching, please do leave the video a thumbs up by pressing the like button, because that would seriously help me out. And thank you so much for hanging out with me again today. I really appreciate the fact that you took time out of your day to watch my content. It really means the absolute world to me. And again, if you are new here, please be part of the family and subscribe to the channel for more true crime content. That being said, I will see you guys in the next episode. So until then, take care of yourselves, enjoy the rest of your day, and cheers.